Imagine a remote, windswept island, battered by the relentless fury of the North Atlantic. On this desolate rock stands a lone lighthouse, a beacon of hope against the crushing darkness. But in December of 1900, this light went out, and the three men sworn to keep it burning vanished into thin air, leaving behind a mystery that has baffled experts and haunted imaginations for over a century. This is the story of the Flannan Lighthouse. Our story begins just before Christmas, 1900. The Flannan Isles, a small group of uninhabited islands off the rugged west coast of Scotland, were notorious among sailors. Treacherous currents and frequent, violent storms made navigating these waters a nightmare. That's why, in 1899, the Northern Lighthouse Board built a state-of-the-art lighthouse on Eilean Moor, the largest of the islands. It was a marvel of engineering, a powerful sentinel designed to guide ships safely through the perilous straits. Manning this remote outpost were three experienced keepers. James Decat, the principal keeper, a seasoned veteran with over 20 years of service. With him were two assistant keepers, Thomas Marshall and William MacArthur. A fourth man, Joseph Moore, was part of the rotation but was on shore leave at the time. These weren't just colleagues, they were a tight-knit crew, men who relied on each other for survival in one of the most isolated workplaces on Earth. Their lives were a strict routine of shifts, maintenance, and keeping the lamp, their sacred charge, alight. The first sign that something was wrong came on December 15th. The steamer Arctur, on its route from Philadelphia to Leith, noted in its log that the Flannan Light was not operational, a serious and puzzling failure. Bad weather prevented them from reporting it immediately. It wasn't until December 26th, Boxing Day, that the relief vessel, the Hesperus, finally battled its way through rough seas to reach Eilean Moor. Captain Jim Harvey was on board, along with Joseph Moore, the keeper who was due to start his shift. As they approached the island, a sense of unease settled over the crew. The usual signs of life were absent. No flag was flying from the mast. No one was waiting on the landing stage to welcome them. The supply boxes, meant to be prepared for restocking, were nowhere to be seen. An eerie silence hung over the island, broken only by the cries of seabirds and the crashing of the waves. Captain Harvey sounded the ship's horn and fired a flare. There was no response. The lighthouse stood silent and impassive. A knot of dread tightened in their stomachs. Joseph Moore, his anxiety growing with every passing moment, was rowed ashore. What he found would only deepen the mystery. He climbed the steep stone steps leading up to the lighthouse complex. The main gate was closed, as was the door to the living quarters. He let himself in. The silence inside was deafening. He called out the names of his friends, Decat, Marshall, MacArthur. Only the echo of his own voice answered. Inside the keeper's quarters, things were strangely ordinary, yet deeply unsettling. The kitchen table held plates of meat, pickles, and potatoes, a meal that had been prepared but never eaten. A chair was overturned, as if someone had jumped up in a hurry. The keeper's beds were unmade, and the clock on the wall had stopped. In the entryway, two sets of oilskins, the heavy-duty waterproof gear essential for braving the Atlantic storms, were missing. One set, belonging to William MacArthur, remained hanging on its hook. This was a crucial detail. No keeper, no matter how urgent the situation, would venture out into a winter storm on the Scottish coast without his oilskins. It would have been a death sentence. Moore quickly returned to the Hesperus to report his chilling findings. Two more sailors went ashore with him to conduct a more thorough search. They went up to the lantern room, the very heart of the lighthouse. Everything there was in perfect order. The lamps were cleaned and refilled with oil, ready to be lit. The wicks were trimmed. It was clear the keepers had completed their duties before whatever happened. The official logbook offered the last, cryptic clues. The entries were routine until December 12th. Thomas Marshall, the second assistant, wrote of severe winds the likes of which I have never seen before. He noted that James Decat, the stoic principal keeper, was very quiet and that William MacArthur, a notoriously tough and seasoned mariner, had been crying. This was shocking. For a man like MacArthur, a hardened sailor known for getting into brawls, to be reduced to tears spoke of a terror beyond imagination. The entry for December 13th described the storm continuing to rage. It said all three men had been praying. Why would all three be praying? The lighthouse itself was a fortress, built 150 feet above sea level. They should have been safe inside. The final entry, on December 15th, simply read, "Storm ended, sea calm. God is over all." After that, the logbook was blank. The lighthouse had gone dark, and its keepers had vanished. A formal investigation was launched by the Northern Lighthouse Board. Superintendent Robert Muirhead, who had recruited and knew all three men, traveled to the island. He scoured every inch of Eilean Moor. His official report noted significant damage to the west landing stage. A supply box had been smashed open, its contents strewn about. Iron railings were bent and twisted out of shape, and a railway track used for hauling supplies was ripped from its concrete moorings. A huge rock, weighing more than a ton, had been dislodged and moved. Muirhead's conclusion was tragically simple. He theorized that on the afternoon of December 15th, after the storm had passed, Decat and Marshall had gone down to the west landing to secure the ropes and crane. He speculated that a massive, unexpected wave, a freak rogue wave, had surged up the cliff face and swept them into the sea. Seeing this from the lighthouse, MacArthur, in a panic, would have run down to help his friends, forgetting his oilskins in his haste, only to be claimed by the next monstrous wave. This became the official explanation. It was plausible, logical, and it closed the case. But for many, it just didn't add up. Why would two experienced keepers venture out during a storm, against all regulations? Why would they go down to the exposed landing stage when the log said the storm had already passed? And why would all three men leave the lighthouse unmanned, a cardinal sin in their profession? And what about the untouched meal? It suggested they were all inside right before they disappeared. With no bodies ever recovered and so many unanswered questions, the public imagination ran wild. The void left by the facts was quickly filled with speculation, folklore, and supernatural theories. One popular theory suggests a heated argument or a fight broke out among the men. Perhaps MacArthur, with his reputation for being a brawler, flew into a rage. Maybe a fight on the cliff edge resulted in all three falling into the churning sea below. But their colleagues and families dismissed this. They were professionals, and despite the pressures of isolation, violence seemed entirely out of character. Another, more sinister idea is that of foul play. Could they have been abducted by foreign spies or pirates? While romantic, this is highly unlikely. The Flannan Isles were of little strategic importance, and there was no evidence of any other vessel being in the area, nor any reason to kidnap three lighthouse keepers. And then, we enter the realm of the supernatural. The islands themselves were steeped in local folklore. They were known as the Seven Hunters, and local shepherds considered the place haunted, refusing to spend the night there. They spoke of strange voices on the wind and of a mysterious phantom piper. Some stories claim the men were taken by a giant sea serpent, a kraken-like beast from the deep. Others suggest they were abducted by aliens, their UFO leaving no trace. One tale even whispers of a ghostly longboat filled with spectral figures that carried the men away to a watery grave. While these supernatural explanations are exciting, they remain pure speculation. The most likely theory, despite its flaws, is still the one proposed by Robert Muirhead, a tragic, unpredictable accident caused by the awesome power of the ocean. Rogue waves are a real and terrifying phenomenon, capable of immense destruction. A series of these waves could certainly explain the damage to the landing and the disappearance of the men. Perhaps the logbook entries describing the storm were exaggerated due to cabin fever and the immense psychological pressure of their isolation. The overturned chair and the untouched meal could simply be signs of a sudden departure to attend to an emergency outside. Over 120 years later, the Flannan Isles Lighthouse is still operational, now fully automated, but the ghosts of Decat, Marshall, and MacArthur remain. Their story has inspired poems, operas, songs, and even a feature film. It serves as a stark reminder of the unforgiving nature of the sea and the courage of those who work in its midst. What do you think happened on that lonely rock in December 1900? Was it a freak wave, a moment of madness, or something else entirely? The truth was washed away by the Atlantic tide, leaving us with one of the most enduring and chilling maritime mysteries of all time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this dive into the unknown, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories about the world's greatest unsolved mysteries. We'll see you next time.